The Awakened Brain, a journey into the sacred science of the soul. Inspired by Dr. Lisa Miller, written and published by Audible Aria. This audiobook invites you into a living conversation between neuroscience and spirituality. A path of healing, awakening, and deep inner knowing. Each chapter is a portal into trust, connection, purpose, and presence. Let your heart listen. Let your soul remember. This is your journey inward. Chapter 1. The Inborn Gift of Spiritual Perception. Spirituality is not a belief system handed down from authority. It is not a doctrine. It is not a lifestyle trend. It is a perception, a mode of awareness we are born with. We arrive on this earth already seeded with the capacity to perceive into the spiritual dimension of life. This capacity, like sight or sound or touch, is an organic way of knowing. It is built into the fabric of our biology, our mind, our soul. As a scientist, I've spent decades studying this truth. And what I've discovered is not merely conceptual. It is breathtaking. When someone is spiritually awake, their brain literally lights up in a pattern we can now identify and measure. The spiritually engaged brain vibrates in harmony with all of life. This is not just a poetic metaphor. It is scientific fact. It is as if the inner instrument of the human being is tuned to the song of the universe. What does this mean practically? It means that you and every person you've ever met carry within you a sacred organ of perception. You have the ability to recognize a deeper order, to sense love behind the chaos, to feel guided when logic runs dry. We perceive spiritual truth in countless ways. In gut instincts that turn out to be right. In moments of synchronicity that feel too precise to be coincidence. In dreams that carry the weight of messages we didn't invent. This awareness isn't bound to one tradition. It doesn't matter whether you were raised Catholic or Buddhist, Jewish or secular, or whether you've ever stepped inside a place of worship. Across cultures and backgrounds, we all share the same inborn capacity for what I call a transcendent relationship, a felt, experiential connection with a higher presence. You may call that presence God or the universe, spirit, source, Hashem, nature. It doesn't matter what word you use. The experience itself is universal. We also share another core spiritual capacity, the ability to love one another as sacred beings. Even if we've never spoken a religious word in our lives, we know how to feel another's suffering. We know how to sit beside someone who's grieving and say nothing, yet offer everything. That's not just empathy. That's relational spirituality. A sacred bond formed not through doctrine, but through soul. These two dimensions, the transcendent and the relational, form the backbone of our spiritual nature. And the beauty of it is, they evolve. They grow with us. Spiritual perception is not static. It deepens across the lifespan. It matures through experience, especially through struggle. And yet, at its core, it is always there, a quiet frequency under the noise of modern life. Today, we live in what may be the most individualistic culture in human history. We are taught to rely on logic, on achievement, on self-sufficiency. We are told to trust only what we can measure. And in the process, we have dulled our spiritual senses. We've forgotten how to listen with the inner ear. We've trained ourselves to ignore the whispers that rise up in silence. But the spiritual dimension does not disappear just because we stop paying attention. It waits. It waits for us to remember, to return. to recognize that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. And here's the paradox. Our greatest strength as human beings is not our intellect, not our productivity, not our ability to dominate or control. Our greatest strength is our capacity to be open, to be receptive, to be moved by what we cannot fully explain. So often I hear people ask, how do I live that way? How do I access the awakened brain? The answer is both simple and profound. You remember. You begin by remembering that this way of seeing has always been with you. It was there in childhood, before the world told you what was real and what wasn't. It was there in your quietest moments, when something unnameable gave you peace. It is there now, waiting behind the rush of thought, behind the tightness of fear, behind the drive to control. To live from this place is not about rejecting science or rationality. I am a scientist, but I believe science is at its best when it is in conversation with the mystery, when it acknowledges that not all truth can be dissected under a microscope. Some truths must be felt, must be lived. The awakened brain is our birthright. It is not the privilege of the few. It does not require a special calling. It is yours. You are wired for spiritual awareness. You are equipped to perceive beauty, connection, presence. You are not alone, and you never were. All it takes to begin is a shift, a turning inward, a willingness to feel, a moment of wonder, a single breath where you choose to listen, not to the noise, but to the stillness beneath it. That stillness is not empty. It is full. It is alive. It is where the divine meets you, not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper, as the truth that has always been quietly waiting for you to notice. Chapter 2: A Culture in Crisis and the Loss of the Sacred. We are living in an age of paradox. We are more connected than ever before. Digitally, globally, constantly. And yet loneliness has become the most common human experience. Our screens glow late into the night, full of images and information, but the light doesn't reach our hearts. Something essential is missing. And that missing piece isn't entertainment. It's not convenience. It's not even relationship in the ordinary sense. It's meaning. It's connection to something beyond ourselves, something unshakable, something sacred. We are facing a silent epidemic, not of disease, but of despair. In the last few decades, suicide rates have risen to unprecedented levels, especially among the young. Gen Z is more anxious, more depressed, and more overwhelmed than any generation in recent history. The statistics are shocking, but they are not surprising. Because when a culture cuts itself off from the sacred, it begins to unravel. We have slowly, subtly dismantled the structures that once offered spiritual grounding. Community rituals have faded. Shared prayer has grown rare. Even simple moments of silence are drowned out by constant stimulation. What we've lost is not just tradition. It's the rhythm of collective soul. The loss is not only psychological, it is existential. As we've pursued individual success, we've forgotten collective sacredness. We've replaced spiritual rituals with productivity hacks, devotion with data, reverence with routine. And yet, beneath all of that, the human spirit continues to call out, because it cannot be fully silenced. We were not designed to live in spiritual isolation. The soul is relational by nature. Here's what the science tells us, clearly and powerfully. When people engage in shared spiritual life, the outcomes are profound. In a landmark meta-analysis that included thousands of cases, We found that individuals who participated in collective spiritual practice, community prayer, sacred gatherings, even informal spiritual support, had an 82% lower risk of dying by suicide. That number is staggering. 4 out of 5 lives saved. Not by medication, not by therapy alone, but by the presence of something greater shared among people. This tells us something essential. Spiritual life is not just a personal luxury. It is a communal necessity. We thrive not only when we feel connected to the divine, but when we feel that connection together. The very act of turning towards something sacred, side by side with another, begins to restore what our culture has eroded. And this isn't limited to religious institutions. It could be a circle of friends who meditate together, a family who holds hands and gives thanks before a meal, strangers who gather at a retreat center, guided by sincerity more than doctrine. What matters most is the presence of a third element, what some traditions call the third presence, though I would say it is the first, that sacred witness, that divine thread that runs through all of us when we open the space for it. The invitation is always open. We can begin again, tonight, even now. We can look into the eyes of someone we love and say, let's be present. Let's welcome in something more. We can take the risk of reverence in a world that has become ironically suspicious of meaning. And in doing so, we don't just save others. We begin to save ourselves. But this isn't about going back to how things were. This is about choosing consciously to reintegrate the sacred into the modern world. To understand that while progress is valuable, it is not enough. While science is essential, it is incomplete without wonder. While achievement moves us forward, only reverence can bring us home. This is not a rejection of modern life. It is an invitation to deepen it. We don't need more opinions. We need more awe. We don't need more experts. We need more elders. We don't need more apps. We need more presence. Presence with each other and presence with the divine. When spiritual life is reduced to a private belief, something vital is lost. But when it is lived, breathed, and shared, when it becomes a part of how we move through the world, it becomes a medicine. And that medicine heals more than the mind. It heals the soul. So, if you are listening to this and feeling a yearning, a pull toward something you can't quite name, honor that. You're not broken. You're being called. You're feeling the natural ache of the human soul that remembers what it means to be whole and wants to go back. Not to an institution, not to a dogma, but to a deeper belonging, to a life where the sacred is not an afterthought, but a foundation. A life where healing happens in presence, where community means communion, and where the sacred is not rare, it is real. Chapter 3. The brain as a conduit of consciousness. We've been taught for most of the modern era that the brain is the command center of the human being, that thoughts are manufactured inside the skull like products on a factory line, that consciousness is an output, a spark created by neurons firing in the dark. But what if that model, while useful in some ways, is profoundly incomplete? What if the brain is not the source of awareness, but the receiver? This is the revolutionary shift we are now beginning to witness in science. The brain does not simply generate thoughts like a machine. Instead, it appears to function more like an antenna, receiving, tuning, filtering a much greater field of awareness. In this view, consciousness is not locked inside us. It moves through us, It surrounds us, and the brain is the interface, a sacred organ that allows spirit to become experience. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is where the data is pointing. In MRI and EEG studies across different populations, we consistently see something extraordinary. When people enter a deep state of spiritual connection, whether they are Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, or non-religious, similar neurological patterns emerge. Despite their differences in language, culture, or theology, their brains light up in the same way. The same core networks activate. This tells us something essential. Spiritual experience is not random. It's not purely psychological. It's universal. It's wired into our biology. Our brains have built-in pathways for transcendence, built-in systems for bonding with the sacred, built-in capacities for experiencing connection beyond the visible. But these are not just pretty brain scans. They suggest a deeper metaphysical truth. That consciousness itself is not made by the brain, but accessed through it. The awakened brain is not simply reacting. It is perceiving a reality that exists beyond the body. Let me share one of the most compelling studies I know. A traditional healer, someone trained in indigenous medicine, was placed inside an MRI machine. His patient was down the hall in another room, sometimes even in a building across the street. As the healer began his work, something remarkable occurred. A specific neurological pattern lit up on the screen. And then, within moments, the same pattern appeared in the patient's brain, even though they were separated physically. One consciousness, two bodies, two machines, one signal. How do we make sense of this? We could call it energy transfer, or resonance, or non-local awareness. But beyond the labels, something sacred is being revealed. We are connected in ways that defy conventional explanation. Consciousness is not bound by space, not contained by flesh. It can bridge buildings, bridge minds, bridge hearts. And the brain, far from being a closed system, is an open window into this field. This is where the emerging science of post-material consciousness comes in. A field that dares to go beyond the limits of materialist thinking. Where traditional neuroscience sees the brain as a machine, post-material science sees the brain as a gateway, a conduit, a place where soul and biology meet. But there's a danger here too, a new trap that mirrors the old one. In our enthusiasm to embrace consciousness science, we must resist replacing materialism with another form of human-centered arrogance. It's tempting to say, we are the creators of consciousness now. We've found the code. But that too is false. Consciousness does not come from us. It moves through us. And we are participants, not proprietors. We are not the authors of divine intelligence. We are vessels of it. And our greatest power comes not from dominating it, but from aligning with it. From recognizing that we don't control consciousness. We dance with it. We are shaped by it. And in our most awakened states, we become mirrors of it. This view is deeply humbling and deeply empowering, because it means that every person, regardless of education, background, or belief, is already part of something vast and wise. You don't need to earn the right to perceive the sacred. You don't need credentials to feel divine presence. You were born with the antenna. It's already there. The question is simply, are you tuning in? In the book The Awakened Brain, I explore this idea through both science and story. And again, what becomes clear is this. The brain is only one part of the equation. Yes, we can see the patterns on a scan. Yes, we can study the correlations. But behind every data point is a living soul, feeling love, hearing guidance, waking up to the unity of all things. This is not about rejecting science, it is about expanding it. Science, at its best, is a method of wonder, a way of asking deeper and deeper questions, a way of discovering not just how things work, but what they mean. And when we allow science and spirituality to meet, not as enemies, but as partners, we unlock a fuller picture of reality. So, what does this mean for your life? It means that your experiences of intuition, of sacred connection, of moments that defy logic, those are not illusions. They are signals. You are not imagining things when you feel someone thinking of you. You're not naive when you act on a gut instinct that turns out to be true. You are living from the awakened brain. And that brain is not a factory. It is a bridge. Chapter 4. Letting go of control and trusting the unknown. We live in a world obsessed with control. We are taught from an early age to plan, to predict, to pursue outcomes with surgical precision. We build our identities around the illusion of certainty. Careers mapped out in spreadsheets, relationships strategized like chess games, dreams engineered like business plans. And yet, for all our effort, so much of what shapes our lives lies beyond our control. This truth is not a failure of will. It's a feature of existence. Life, by its very nature, is uncertain. The more we resist that fact, the more we suffer. But the moment we begin to embrace it, truly embrace it, we step into a different kind of awareness. One not driven by grasping, but by opening. One not obsessed with outcomes, but grounded in presence. This is the realm of the awakened brain. There's a popular belief, often dressed up as manifestation, that if we just align our thoughts with what we want, if we focus hard enough, believe deeply enough, visualize vividly enough, we'll receive exactly what we ordered, as if from a cosmic delivery service. But this belief, seductive as it is based on a misunderstanding of how consciousness actually works. The truth is, what we want is shaped by what we already know, by our history, our ego, our wounds. When we build our lives around those wants, we end up recreating the past. But life, true, sacred, expansive life, does not emerge from old blueprints. It comes from something deeper, something we can't predict, something that requires surrender. Letting go is not giving up. It is waking up. It is turning from the narrow hallway of control into the vast open field of dialogue with life itself. When we surrender our grip on how things should be, we become available to how they could be. Often in ways that are more beautiful, more alive, and more aligned than anything we could have planned. This doesn't mean we stop using reason or intention. It means we stop idolizing them. We learn to hold our goals with an open palm. We begin to trust the timing of what unfolds. And we pay attention, not just to what we're chasing, but to what is trying to find us. You may have experienced this already. Perhaps you were pushing hard for something, a job, a relationship, a specific outcome. And the more you pushed, the more elusive it became. And then, when you finally let go, something unexpected arrived, something better, something you didn't know you needed. That's not coincidence. That's wisdom moving through life itself. Synchronicities begin to appear when we stop trying to micromanage reality. Patterns emerge. Insights rise, uninvited. The right person calls. A sentence in a book jumps out like a message meant just for you. These are not random. They are the universe responding to your openness. They are the fruit of surrender. But surrender is not passive. It's deeply engaged. It's a daily, moment-to-moment choice to listen more than dictate, to respond more than react, to allow mystery to lead you somewhere your mind cannot yet see. This is how the awakened brain operates. Not through domination, but through dialogue. It asks, what is life showing me right now? What is trying to come through this moment? What am I being invited to learn, release, or discover? When we live this way, we move from fear to faith. Not blind faith, but experiential trust. We begin to realize that the universe is not neutral. It is intelligent, it is responsive, and it is interested not only in what we achieve, but in who we become. This shift changes everything. Life becomes less about chasing and more about cultivating, less about mastering outcomes, more about deepening presence. We begin to see that our greatest moments of transformation rarely came from getting exactly what we wanted. They came from what we didn't plan, from the detour, the interruption, the unexpected encounter. There's an elegance in this way of living, a grace. It's not flashy, but it's powerful. Because when we surrender control, we don't become lost. We become found. We don't lose power. We find a deeper one. A power rooted not in force, but in flow. If you're struggling with letting go, know this. Surrender isn't a one-time act. It's a practice. It's learning to breathe in the unknown. To meet uncertainty, not as a threat, but as a teacher. It's remembering again and again that your worth is not defined by what you control, but by how you relate to what arises. The awakened brain doesn't shut down when the plan falls apart. It opens wider. It sees the disruption as data, the delay as direction. It knows that what feels like a loss of control is often a moment of realignment, a recalibration with a deeper rhythm, one we didn't know we were missing. And over time, that rhythm becomes familiar. We begin to trust it. We begin to hear its music, even in silence. We learn to walk not by sight, but by resonance. Not by maps, but by presence. This is not the way of the world as it's often taught, but it is the way of the soul. And when the soul leads, life becomes less like a project to manage and more like a mystery to welcome. Chapter 5. Parenting the spiritual child within and without. There's something sacred about the way a child sees the world. Long before language becomes dominant, before schooling imposes categories, before the rational mind builds its defenses, the child is a wide open channel. Their awareness is pure, unfiltered. They don't just observe the world, they commune with it. They speak to trees. They listen to animals. They ask questions that have no easy answers. They are born spiritually awake. In many ways, children are our greatest spiritual teachers. They remind us of what we've forgotten, that the world is alive, that we are part of something vast, and that the invisible is just as real as the visible. They embody a kind of natural reverence, a spontaneous joy, an intuitive sense of the sacred. As parents, caregivers, or elders, we often feel the pressure to shape them, to prepare them for the world. But what if our real task is not to shape, but to protect? What if our job is not to fill their minds, but to guard their light? To keep their natural spiritual awareness intact in a world that so often teaches them to shut it down? Children don't need us to explain God to them. They need us to not get in the way of their experience of the divine. They don't need perfect theology. They need presence. They need adults who are willing to honor the mystery with them, who are not afraid to sit in silence, to wonder aloud, to cry, to pray, to ask big questions without demanding final answers. Too often, we unintentionally diminish a child's spirituality, not by attacking it, but by ignoring it. When a child says, "I dreamed of Grandma and she told me something," or "I felt something in the trees talking to me," we may laugh it off or change the subject. But to that child, it was real. It is real. And when we dismiss it, we teach them that their most sacred perceptions don't belong. But when we honor those moments, something remarkable happens. The child feels seen, not just on the surface, but at the soul level. And we, as adults, are changed too. Because the spiritual light in a child doesn't just illuminate their path. It reawakens something in us. It speaks to the child within us, the one who once knew how to listen, how to play with the divine, how to move through life as if it were a sacred dance. There's a beautiful reciprocity in this dynamic. As we protect their flame, they rekindle ours. As we witness their wonder, we remember our own. Parenting then becomes not just a responsibility, but a sacred invitation, a chance to walk beside a soul on their unfolding journey, and to let them walk beside us on ours. And the science supports this. Studies have shown that when even one person in a room enters a deep, transcendent state, through prayer, meditation, or awe, others around them begin to mirror that state. Their neurons come online, their perception shifts. This is particularly true with children. Their spiritual openness radiates outward. They are transmitters of presence. When a spiritually connected child enters a space, they elevate the room, not through words, but through frequency, through being. They create an atmosphere where others, often unconsciously, soften, breathe. Remember, it's not mystical sentiment. It's neurobiology in harmony with soul. This is why presence matters more than perfection. As parents, we often fear we're not doing enough, that we're not spiritually equipped, that our moments of distraction, frustration, or uncertainty will somehow dim our children's light. But spiritual parenting isn't about being flawless. It's about being real. It's about naming your humanness, saying, "I was caught in worry today and I forgot to see you. Will you sit with me while I reconnect?" It's about including your child in your own spiritual journey, not hiding your struggles, but inviting them into the process, letting them see that even adults get lost and found again when we open that window, when we share our path, our practices, our prayers. We give our children a roadmap back to themselves. We show them that the spiritual life is not something reserved for monks or mystics, but something woven into ordinary days. A conversation at bedtime, a shared moment of silence before dinner, a walk where you both listen for something greater. And just as we attend to the spiritual child in our care, we must also learn to parent the spiritual child within ourselves. That part of us that still remembers how to feel deeply, that still longs for beauty, truth, and love without condition. That still hopes, still listens, still dreams. When we turn toward that inner child with gentleness and respect, we heal generational wounds. We disrupt cycles. We create new possibilities. Not only for ourselves, but for everyone we influence. So much of what children need is simple. Someone to see them, to honor their truth, and to walk with them. Not ahead of them, not above them, but beside them. To say, with our presence more than our words. I believe in the light you carry. I will protect it, not extinguish it. And in your light, I see again my own. Because at the heart of it, parenting is not about control. It's about stewardship. And spiritual parenting is not about giving answers. It's about holding space for mystery, for wonder, for the sacred presence that moves in and through all of us. Chapter 6: The Awakened Brain and its 4 Pathways. There's a shift that happens when we begin to awaken, not in theory, but in felt reality. It doesn't start with a book or a belief. It begins with an experience. A moment when something opens. A moment when we feel, maybe for the first time in years, that we're not alone. That we're being held, guided, that we belong to something infinite and alive. This shift isn't just emotional. It isn't just spiritual. It's physiological. It's neurological. It's visible on a brain scan. Over the past decade, I've been privileged to study what I call the awakened brain, the neural signature of spiritual awareness. And what we've found across diverse populations and belief systems is that there is a consistent pattern in the brain when someone experiences a direct connection to the transcendent. The research began by inviting people of many different backgrounds: Catholic, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, spiritual but not religious, even those with no tradition, to describe a moment when they felt deeply connected to something greater than themselves. Not a thought about God, but a moment of direct experience. A walk in nature that felt like communion. A dream that felt like a message. A prayer that felt like it reached beyond the room. We then brought them into the fMRI lab and scanned their brains. What we saw astonished us. Despite their different stories, languages, and frameworks, the same 4 neural pathways consistently lit up. These are not minor fluctuations. These are robust, replicable signatures. What we now understand to be the 4 dimensions of the awakened brain. The first dimension is shared with mindfulness, the quieting of the default mode network. This is the part of the brain that loops endlessly on our to-do lists, our regrets, our worries, our self-narratives. When we enter a spiritual state, this network quiets. The inner chatter softens. The mental noise fades. We become present, attentive, available. But it's the next 3 dimensions that are unique to spiritual experience. And they're where things get truly profound. The second pathway involves the bonding network of the brain. This is the same system activated when an infant is held in a parent's arms, or when we experience secure, loving connection. In the awakened brain, this bonding network becomes active not in response to another human, but in response to the transcendent. People in this state report feeling deeply loved, not in a romantic or conditional sense, but in a cosmic, all-encompassing way. The divine, whatever form it takes, becomes a loving presence, not an idea, but an experience. We feel held, we feel safe, we feel seen by something infinite. The third pathway is in the ventral attention network, which allows for a broader field of awareness. Under ordinary circumstances, our attention is narrow, focused on what's right in front of us. But in a spiritual state, this network expands. It's as if a floodlight turns on, allowing us to perceive what's on the edge of our awareness. We start noticing signs, synchronicities, subtle cues from the world around us. We begin to sense that we're in dialogue with life itself, that the universe is responding to us in real time. This isn't fantasy. It's measurable. It's consistent. and it suggests something astonishing. The awakened brain is not just aware of the moment, it's in conversation with it. It doesn't just observe reality, it participates in it, dynamically and intuitively. The fourth and final pathway involves the parietal lobe, which helps us perceive boundaries. Where I end and you begin. In a state of spiritual awakening, this boundary becomes permeable. We don't lose our sense of self, but we begin to experience ourselves as part of a larger whole. We remain distinct, yet deeply connected. The illusion of separateness begins to dissolve, and a sense of unity takes its place. We feel part of the family of life, of the human story, of the web of being. This is not a mental construct. It's a felt truth. It's the reason people across cultures describe spiritual awakening in such similar terms. I felt at one with everything. I saw myself in all beings. I felt the presence of God in everyone and everything. These aren't poetic flourishes. They are reports from the field of awakened awareness. When these 4 dimensions come online, something extraordinary happens. We begin to live from a different center. We become more compassionate, more open, more resilient. We make decisions from a deeper place. We stop reacting and start responding. We begin to trust our inner knowing, not as a guess, but as a form of data. And we navigate life not just through logic, but through resonance. The most beautiful part is that this capacity is not reserved for mystics or monks. Every human being is born with it. We all have the neural architecture to awaken. But just like physical muscles, spiritual awareness needs attention. It needs practice. It needs space to grow. When we meditate, pray, journal, spend time in nature, or serve others from a place of love, we are strengthening these pathways. We're not just becoming more peaceful. We're becoming more perceptive, more aligned, more capable of sensing and following the sacred guidance that is always available. The awakened brain is not a destination. It's a way of being, a way of seeing, a way of participating in life as if every moment has meaning, because it does. This is the great invitation of our time. Not simply to survive or succeed, but to awaken. To remember who we are, to reclaim the full spectrum of our human awareness, and to walk through this life not just as individuals, but as luminous beings connected to the whole. Chapter 7. Synchronicity as the language of the universe. There's a moment, subtle but unforgettable, when something happens that feels too perfectly timed to be random. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they call. You feel lost in a decision. And a line from a stranger's conversation answers your silent question. You're grieving, wondering if your loved one is still with you. And a song you shared together plays in a quiet cafe just as you enter. These are not mere coincidences. These are synchronicities. They are the fingerprints of a universe that is alive, aware, and in constant dialogue with us. Synchronicity is not magic. It is meaning revealing itself. It is the merging of 2 seemingly unrelated events in a way that points to a deeper order. Carl Jung gave us the term, but the phenomenon is ancient. Recognized across spiritual traditions and cultures, it is the world speaking, not in words, but in patterns. It is life whispering, I see you. You're not alone. Keep going. We are often taught to dismiss these moments. We call them chance, coincidence, luck. But when we begin to awaken, something shifts. Our perception widens. we realize these events are part of a greater network of communication. They are the way the sacred speaks. Through timing, through pattern, through resonance. The rational mind wants to explain everything. It wants control. And yet, some of the most profound guidance we'll ever receive comes in moments we couldn't have predicted or planned. That's not failure. That's grace. What makes synchronicity so powerful is that it bypasses the analytical mind and goes straight to the soul. You know when it's real. You feel it in your body. A sense of electricity, a clarity, a softening, or stillness. It carries a frequency that's unmistakable. And over time, as you begin to trust it, you enter into relationship with it. You stop demanding proof. You start listening with the heart. In neuroscience, we now understand that the brain has specific networks responsible for pattern recognition, especially when combined with an expanded attention system. In awakened states, we see increased activation in these areas. The brain becomes more attuned to subtle connections, not imaginary ones, but meaningful ones. The awakened brain doesn't just perceive more, it perceives differently. It catches what others miss. But the question is, what do we do with these moments? How do we integrate synchronicity into how we live? The first step is to notice, to stay present, to resist the impulse to dismiss the improbable just because it can't be explained. The second is to ask gently, what might this be showing me? Not in a paranoid or obsessive way, but with curiosity, with humility. And then, perhaps the most important step is to respond, to act. When a synchronicity presents itself, it's not meant to be admired like art on a wall. It's an invitation, a signpost, a nudge toward alignment. And when we follow those nudges, even tentatively, we strengthen the dialogue. We say to the universe, I'm listening. And the universe answers back. Then I'll keep speaking. I remember a moment when I was walking through a grocery store and felt drawn to a woman nearby. I didn't know her, but something moved in me, a quiet, insistent sense. Tell her she looks healthy. It made no logical sense. Still, I followed the impulse. I turned, smiled, and said, You look so healthy. She burst into tears. I have cancer, she said. I'm starting treatment tomorrow. I've been afraid. And in that moment, a simple phrase became medicine. Not because it came from me, but because I allowed it to come through me. I was the messenger, not the source. That is the power of synchronicity. It connects us not only to guidance, but to one another. It breaks the illusion of separation. It shows us that we are already participating in something sacred, that our lives are intertwined with a wisdom greater than any of us individually. You too have had these moments. You may be having them more often than you realize. A gut feeling that saves you from a bad decision. A dream that brings insight. A pattern that repeats until you finally see the lesson. These are not random. They are your life speaking back to you. They are signals from the field of consciousness. Synchronicity also awakens compassion. Because when you start to realize that the universe is orchestrated in ways that support growth, healing, and connection, you begin to see other people differently. You start to understand that their path is just as guided as yours. That your presence in their life, even for a brief moment, might be part of a divine assignment. You become what I call a trail angel. Someone who shows up with just the right words, at just the right time, for someone who didn't even know they were looking. And others become that for you. It's not dramatic or grand. It's subtle. but it's real. As you deepen this trust, you also develop discernment. You begin to sense the difference between ego-based impulses and spirit-based nudges. Ego is loud, impatient, and hungry. Spirit is quiet, clear, and kind. The more you practice listening, the more fluent you become in this language of the sacred. Eventually, synchronicity becomes less of a surprise and more of a norm. Not because life becomes predictable, but because you become more receptive. You begin to move in rhythm with something deeper, and that rhythm, once heard, can never be forgotten. The awakened brain doesn't treat life like a problem to solve. It treats life like a mystery to honor, a story to co-write, a conversation to continue. And in that ongoing conversation, synchronicity is how the divine reminds us that it is always listening and always near. Chapter 8: Healing through Connection and Divine Guidance. There are moments in life when we feel entirely unequipped. When someone we love is suffering, when loss knocks the air from our lungs, when words fail and logic retreats. In those moments, we often feel small, helpless, unsure of what to say or do. But beneath that uncertainty, something else is moving, a deeper wisdom, a sacred current. The truth is, we are never without guidance. We are never alone in our efforts to bring comfort, to bring healing, to be of service. This is one of the greatest revelations of the awakened brain, that healing does not come from us, it comes through us. We are not the source of transformation. We are the vessels, and the more we allow ourselves to open to that higher presence, whether we call it spirit, source, God, or simply love, the more we are used in ways that are precise, timely, and astonishingly wise. But to be used as a vessel requires trust. Not trust in outcomes, but trust in availability. Trust that if we show up, if we quiet ourselves, if we listen beyond our ego's chatter, what needs to be said or done will be given to us. And often, it is the very thing someone else needs most. I remember a woman I knew who had suffered the devastating loss of a baby in the late stages of pregnancy. I wanted to support her, but I didn't know how. Nothing I could say would fix it. So I prayed. I asked, "Please guide me. Let me be used. Let me speak only what will serve her." And the words came, not as a script, but as a whisper, a clarity. I wrote her a note. Later she told me she read it to her husband many times, that it gave her comfort, that it felt like a light in a very dark place. That moment did not come from intellect. It came from surrender, from opening to the wisdom that lives beyond language. We are built for this. Our biology, our psychology, and our spiritual architecture are designed for interconnectedness. When someone enters a room in a state of peace or prayer, others around them begin to synchronize. Our mirror neurons come online. Our nervous systems respond. We feel it, and we align with it, often unconsciously. This is why presence is more powerful than performance. It's not about having the perfect words. It's about having the right heart. A heart that's open, attuned, willing to be used. A heart that says, "Here I am, use me." That willingness is what makes the difference between advice and grace, between noise and healing. And it's not just for others. Divine guidance is for us too. When we are lost, when we can't see the next step, when the map has burned and the compass has failed, we can turn inward. Not to figure it out, but to ask, to listen, to receive. Sometimes that guidance comes as a strong intuitive pull. Sometimes it comes through a dream. Sometimes it shows up in a conversation or an unexpected invitation. But it always comes, and it always arrives with the same unmistakable feeling: peace, clarity, resonance. Over time, as we practice listening, we begin to trust the difference between the voice of ego and the voice of spirit. Ego is urgent, anxious, and agenda-driven. Spirit is calm, clear, and quietly persistent. One shrinks us, the other expands us. And as we learn to follow that guidance in our own lives, we naturally become channels for it in the lives of others. We begin to move through the world as helpers, not in a grand or self-important way, but in a deeply grounded relational way. We start noticing people more. We start responding to what's unspoken. We offer our attention as medicine, our words as balm, our presence as prayer. This is the miracle of divine guidance. It heals in both directions. It doesn't only move outward, it moves inward too. As we open ourselves to be a source of healing for someone else, we are healed in return. We remember that we are not separate. We are not alone. We are part of a living network of support and love and intelligence. The awakened brain perceives this constantly. It recognizes the interconnectedness of all beings. It sees through the illusion of isolation, and it trusts that when a need arises, whether emotional, spiritual, or physical, the response is already in motion, sometimes through us, sometimes through others, always through grace. You don't have to be a spiritual master to participate in this. You don't have to have all the answers. All you need is willingness, the courage to be available, the humility to ask, the presence to respond. And here's something tender, something beautiful. You're already doing it. You've already been someone's messenger. You've already followed a nudge and said something that changed someone's day, or even their life. Maybe you didn't know it at the time. Maybe you never will. But you were part of the chain. You were the miracle they needed, just as someone has been that for you. This is how healing moves, not in grand gestures, but in everyday grace, in words whispered at the right moment, in eyes that say, I see you, in presence that says, you matter. This is the true economy of the sacred. We give and we are given. We open and we are filled. We listen and we are heard. And the more we align with this way of being, the more natural it becomes. It's not something we perform. It's who we are. Vessels of healing, carriers of presence, embodied prayers walking the earth. Chapter 9. Depression as a doorway to awakening. There are valleys in the human journey, deep ones, places where the light is hard to find and the silence feels unbearable. For many, that valley takes the form of depression, a heaviness that makes ordinary life feel distant, a numbness that disconnects us from the joy we once knew, a fog that surrounds everything, making it hard to remember who we were or why anything matters at all. We tend to talk about depression as if it's purely a malfunction, a chemical imbalance, a glitch in the system. And sometimes, yes, that is part of the picture, but not the whole. What if, for many people, depression is not a sign of weakness or failure, but a signal from the soul? What if it's not a breakdown, but a breakthrough trying to happen, just beneath the surface? I have seen, again and again, in both research and life, that depression often carries within it the seeds of awakening. It brings us to our knees, yes, but it also strips away illusions. It burns through the noise. It empties us of what no longer serves. And in that emptiness, a deeper voice begins to speak. It whispers things we may not have wanted to hear. This life you've built isn't aligned. This pace you're moving at isn't sustainable. This version of success isn't feeding your soul. And at first, that voice can feel cruel. But over time, as we listen more closely, we realize it's not judging us. It's inviting us to slow down, to turn inward, to remember who we really are. During my own journey with infertility, I entered this valley. I had a full life, relationships, work, health, and yet the absence of a child left me hollow. Month after month, the hope that new life would begin was met with silence. And in that silence, something cracked open. Not in an instant, but gradually. I realized that I could not make life happen. I had to receive it. I had to surrender the idea that I could control the timing of the sacred. And in that surrender, something else was born. A new kind of knowing, a new kind of trust, a willingness to walk not by sight, but by faith. That experience changed my brain, yes, but it also changed my heart. It made me more receptive, more attuned, more spiritually alive. We now know from neuroscience that these inner transformations show up in physical form. People who awaken spiritually during or after depression often develop a new brain signature, a high-amplitude alpha rhythm, a coherent wave pattern, one that resonates at the same frequency as the earth itself, the Schumann resonance. In other words, their inner being becomes synchronized with nature, with the field of life, with creation. This is not metaphor, this is real. The awakened brain doesn't just perceive differently, it vibrates differently. And that vibration is not just healing, it's homecoming. It's a return to a state of unity that had been forgotten in the noise and striving of modern life. Of course, there is still a place for therapy, for medication, for support. Spiritual awakening is not a substitute for care, but it is often what completes the care. Because healing the mind without healing the soul leaves something missing, and that missing piece is often what depression is pointing to. What's being asked of us in the valley is not to climb out as quickly as possible. It's to sit, to listen, to let the darkness speak, to ask, what is dying in me, and what is trying to be born? Because underneath the despair, there is often an identity that's breaking apart, an old self that no longer fits, and something new, something wiser and more whole, is waiting to emerge. Not as a concept, but as a lived reality. This is why spiritual communities across the world have always understood suffering not only as a curse, but as a passage. The dark night of the soul is not the end. It is the womb, the place where something sacred is gestating. And when we honor that darkness, when we bring compassion to our pain rather than shame, we begin to move through it with grace. We don't have to force our way out. We can breathe, we can soften. We can trust that the path is unfolding, even when we can't see it. And perhaps most powerfully, when we emerge from that place. When the dawn returns, we carry something with us, a depth, a humility, a wisdom that can never be taken away. And we become, in turn, a light for others. We can sit with them in their darkness, not as saviors, but as companions, as people who know the terrain, as witnesses to the sacred work of transformation. If you are in that valley now, please hear this. You are not broken. You are being remade. You are not lost. You are being invited into a new way of seeing, a new way of being. It may be slow. It may be painful. But it is holy. The pain is real. The disorientation is real, but so is the breakthrough. So is the rebirth. So is the awakening that waits on the other side, not as a return to who you were, but as an arrival into who you're becoming. Chapter 10. Living in harmony with the deep rhythm of life. There is a rhythm that underlies everything. It pulses through the tides and seasons, through the breath of animals, through the soft rise and fall of your own chest. It is not loud, it is not fast, it does not compete for your attention like the world does. But it is always there, constant, ancient, sacred. It is the rhythm of life itself. And when we attune to it, we come into harmony with something that is far wiser and more loving than anything our isolated minds could create. Modern life is not built on that rhythm. It is built on urgency, efficiency, endless productivity. We are praised for how fast we can go, how much we can handle, how many things we can juggle. But in that pace, we lose something precious. Our connection to the deep current. The current that tells us when to move and when to rest, when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to simply be. That current is still speaking. It never stopped. But to hear it, we must slow down. Not forever, not all the time, but long enough to listen, long enough to remember. Nature never forgets its rhythm. Trees do not panic in winter. They do not resist the falling of their leaves. They surrender to the cycle, and in doing so, they are renewed. Animals do not question their migrations or second-guess the timing of rest. They trust the cues of the earth, of the sun, of the stars. They are in constant dialogue with the intelligence that made them. And we can be too. We've simply been trained out of it. Reconnecting with that rhythm doesn't mean we abandon our responsibilities. It means we anchor them in something deeper. We still show up. We still engage. But we do it from a place of alignment, not reactivity. We make decisions that feel congruent with the soul, not just the ego. And we begin to notice that when we live in this way, things flow differently. Opportunities feel organic. Conversations feel purposeful. Life begins to meet us with a grace we never had to force. This is what it means to live from the awakened brain. Not just to have spiritual insights, but to embody them. To move through life in a way that reflects our belonging to something greater. When we live in this rhythm, time begins to feel different. Moments stretch. Simple things, tea, laughter, light, become holy. The world no longer feels like something to conquer, but something to participate in, to contribute to love. And we begin to realize we are not behind. We are not late. We are exactly where we need to be to receive what is next. The rhythm of life is not a race, it's a song, and each of us carries a note. We don't need to sing louder than anyone else. We just need to sing in tune, with our truth, with our timing, with our deepest knowing. That knowing is always available. It doesn't need a special environment. It doesn't require silence or solitude. It can be heard in the chaos too, in the cries of children, in the traffic, in the hard conversations. But to access it, we must pause, even briefly, even with one breath. In that pause, we ask, what is this moment asking of me? Where is life leading? What am I being invited to release or embrace? Over time, we learn to trust the answers. They don't come as lightning bolts. They come as a quiet inner resonance, a sense of peace, a sense of yes. And the more we follow that yes, the more our lives begin to unfold. Not with ease at every turn, but with integrity, with alignment. This is where true power lives. Not in control, but in coherence. Not in performance, but in presence. When you live in harmony with the rhythm of life, people feel it. They trust you. They are drawn to you. Not because you have all the answers, but because your presence carries a truth. You become a tuning fork, a source of calm in a noisy world. And you too are nourished. Because when you live in this way, you stop burning out. You stop chasing. You start receiving. You move from force to flow, from scarcity to sufficiency, from separation to connection. And this truly is the culmination of spiritual awakening. Not just an experience of light, but a life lived in rhythm with that light. A life where your inner world and outer world begin to reflect each other, where your relationships, your work, your choices, all begin to align with the sacred pulse that has always been there waiting. You don't have to be perfect to live this way. You don't have to be enlightened. You just have to be willing to listen, willing to slow down, willing to believe that your life is not random, that it is meaningful, guided, and held. Because it is, and so are you. Thank you for listening.